The first time I breathed without wheezing, I was 22 years old. I was sitting in a motel room 3 towns away from the house where I grew up, eating a hamburger I had bought from a drive-through window. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and loneliness. The bedspread was the color of a bruise, and I was breathing in, out, without the constriction in my chest that had been my constant companion since I could remember. I waited for the attack, for the tightness, for the familiar panic that had sent me reaching for my inhaler 10, 12, 20 times a day. It didn't come. I took another bite of the hamburger. Lettuce, tomato, mayonnaise, beef. Foods my mother had told me would kill me. Foods I had been trained to fear since I was old enough to chew. I chewed slowly, waiting for the swelling in my throat, the hives on my skin, the anaphylaxis that would require the EpiPen my mother had taught me to carry like a crucifix. Nothing happened. I finished the hamburger. I licked the mayonnaise from my fingers, and then I lay back on the bruise-colored bedspread, and I cried not from pain, but from the devastating realization that I had never been sick, that my body was not a defective machine requiring constant maintenance, that my mother had been the disease all along. She was in rehabilitation at the time. A hip replacement, 3 weeks of physical therapy in a facility 40 minutes from home. She had called me every evening, her voice warm with the pleasure of being needed, asking about my symptoms, reminding me to take my medications, to use the air purifier to avoid the triggers she had spent 2 decades cataloging. I had lied to her. I had told her I was taking everything. I had hidden the pills in a shoebox under my bed. I had stopped using the inhaler. I had opened the windows, and instead of dying, as she had trained me to believe I would, I had started to live. That was the beginning. But it would take 17 more years before I stood at her funeral and told the truth. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're here, maybe you know what it means to have your own body turned into a prison by the person who claimed to be your warden. Maybe you know the particular horror of discovering that the care you received was actually captivity, that the love was actually control. If this is your first time, hit that subscribe button. We tell stories here about women who reclaim their bodies from the people who colonized them, who turn their medical records into weapons of liberation. Here's my story. Here's my story. I was born Vera Dolores Castellano on a Thursday in April, the only child of a mother who had miscarried 3 times before me and who had decided, long before my birth, that I would be her miracle. Her reason for living. Her patient. My earliest memories are of hospitals. The smell of alcohol swabs, the beep of monitors, the particular hush of rooms where bad news is delivered. My mother was a pediatric nurse, retired by the time I was born, but she kept her credentials, her connections, her white coat that she wore at home like a priest's vestments. I was sick from infancy. Asthma, they said. Severe. I had attacks that left me blue-lipped and gasping, and my mother would rush me to the emergency room, where doctors would praise her quick thinking, her medical knowledge, her devotion. She knew the protocols. She knew the medications. She knew exactly how much albuterol to administer, exactly when to call for help, exactly how to position my body to maximize airflow. What I didn't know, until I was 22, was that she also knew how to induce an asthma attack. The talcum powder was the first clue. After I escaped to the motel, after I ate the hamburger and breathed without wheezing, I went back to the house to retrieve my things. My mother was still in rehabilitation. I had 3 days. I searched her room, something I had never dared to do before, something that felt like sacrilege. In her closet, behind boxes of medical journals, I found a container of industrial-grade talcum powder. The label warned, respiratory irritant, may cause bronchospasm in susceptible individuals. I opened it. The smell, sharp, chemical, familiar, flooded my memory. This was the powder she had used to dust my pillows, my sheets, my pajamas. To keep you fresh, she had said, to prevent skin irritation. I had slept on that powder for 20 years. I had inhaled it every night. And every morning I had woken up wheezing, reaching for the inhaler she held ready like a sacrament. I found other things. Caffeine tablets, hidden in a bottle labeled vitamin B12. She had been crushing them into my evening tea, the calming herbal blend that she brewed herself and that I was never allowed to prepare. The caffeine explained the insomnia, the racing heart, the panic attacks that had sent me to the emergency room convinced I was dying. The panic attacks that she had treated with benzodiazepines, which she administered herself, which made me dependent and docile and grateful. I found my medical records, not the ones she showed me, the ones she had hidden. Allergy tests, repeated annually, all negative. Food challenge results, showing no reaction to dairy, to wheat, to the soy and nuts and shellfish that had been banned from my diet since childhood. A letter from a specialist, dated when I was 12, suggesting Munchausen syndrome by proxy and recommending immediate intervention. My mother had changed doctors the next week. She had told me the specialist was incompetent, that he had almost killed me with his negligence. I had believed her. I sat on the floor of her closet, surrounded by the evidence of my captivity, and I read a nursing note from my file. Mother appears relieved when patient symptoms worsen. Observed smiling during respiratory distress episode. Recommend psychiatric evaluation. The note was unsigned. It had never been followed up. My mother had seen it, I was certain. She had removed it from the active file and hidden it here with the talcum powder and the caffeine tablets and the other tools of my imprisonment. I was 22. I had never had a sleepover, never been to a birthday party, never eaten in a restaurant, never kissed anyone. I had been homeschooled, which meant I had been taught by my mother in our kitchen, between medical appointments and treatments, my curriculum designed around my fragile health. I had no friends, no social security number of my own. She had kept it to protect me from identity theft. No bank account, no driver's license. I was a ghost in a body that had never actually been dying, and I was furious. I didn't confront her, not then. I was too raw, too unsteady, too afraid that if I accused her she would find a way to make me sick again, to make me need her, to make me stay. Instead, I applied to medical school. It was an act of rebellion disguised as ambition. I told her I wanted to follow in her footsteps, to help children the way she had helped me. She was delighted. She helped me study for the MCAT, or rather, she supervised my studying, bringing me brain-boosting smoothies that I learned to pour down the sink when she wasn't looking. She wrote my recommendation letters, using her nursing credentials to vouch for my resilience and dedication. I got into school 3 hours away. I told her I would commute on weekends, that I couldn't live in the dorms because of my environmental sensitivities. She agreed, reluctantly, but she agreed. She couldn't say no without revealing that her concern was control, not care. The first week I moved into student housing. I threw away every medication she had given me. I bought new sheets, new pillows, new clothes that had never touched her talcum powder. I ate in the cafeteria, cautiously at first, then with increasing abandon. Pizza, ice cream, a shrimp cocktail that I approached like a grenade, waiting for the explosion that never came. I was healthy. I had always been healthy. My body was not a defective machine. It was a strong, resilient organism that had survived 2 decades of poisoning and still functioned, still breathed, still carried me forward. Medical school was hard. Not because of the workload. I had been trained to endure discomfort, to push through pain, to perform under pressure. It was hard because I had to learn what normal felt like, how to stay up late without caffeine, how to exercise without an inhaler, how to be around people without monitoring my own symptoms, without waiting for the attack that would require my mother's intervention. I made friends. Tentatively, awkwardly, like a person learning a language they had only read in books. Sarah, who studied next to me in the library and didn't mind my silence. James, who invited me to a party and didn't laugh when I asked what people did at parties. Dr. Morales, my clinical supervisor, who looked at me one day during rounds and said, "You're a natural at this. You have empathy. You know what it's like to be a patient." I did. I knew exactly what it was like to be a patient. To be poked and prodded and measured and medicated. To be a body that existed for someone else's narrative. And I was determined to become the kind of doctor who saw the person inside the body, who asked the questions that no one had asked me. I graduated near the top of my class. I chose family medicine because I wanted to be the first line of defense. The doctor who might recognize the signs I had missed in myself. The one who could save another Vera before she spent 20 years in a prison of fabricated illness. I kept in touch with my mother. Minimally. A phone call on Sundays, which I timed to exactly 15 minutes. A visit on holidays where I monitored my own food and drink, where I brought my own pillow, where I never stayed overnight. She noticed the distance. She commented on it. "You've changed, Vera, you're distant. Is it a boy? Is it stress? Are your symptoms returning?" "My symptoms are fine, Mama," I would say. "I'm just busy. Being a doctor is demanding." "Of course it is," she would say, her voice warm with the satisfaction of being right. "You were always so fragile. I'm amazed you've managed. But you know, if you ever need to come home, if the stress becomes too much, I'm here. I always know what's best for you." I would hang up and I would shower. I would scrub my skin until it was pink, trying to remove the feeling of her gaze, her assessment, her constant measurement of my worth in symptoms and dependencies. I never told her I knew. I was a coward. I told myself it was self-preservation, that confronting her would be dangerous, that she might find a way to hurt me again. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid that if I accused her, she would deny it and some part of me would believe her, would fall back into the old pattern of needing her diagnosis, her treatment, her definition of who I was, so I stayed away. I built a life. I became Dr. Vera Castellano, family physician, respected by colleagues, trusted by patients. I lived alone in a small apartment with windows that opened and food in my refrigerator that I had bought myself. I was, by every external measure, free, but I still dreamed of her, of the talcum powder, of the inhaler, of the way she had smiled when I gasped for air, the way a gardener smiles when a flower finally blooms. She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when I was 38. Aggressive, terminal, 6 months, maybe less. I got the call from her neighbor, a woman named Mrs. Patterson who had checked on her when she didn't answer the door. "Your mother needs you," Mrs. Patterson said. "She's been asking for you." I drove to the house. The house where I had been sick for 20 years. The house where the talcum powder had waited in the closet. I hadn't been inside in 3 years. She was in her bedroom, propped against pillows, thinner than I remembered but with the same sharp eyes, the same assessing gaze. "Vera," she said, her voice weak but warm. "My miracle, you came." "I came," I said. I didn't take her hand. I stood at the foot of the bed in my white coat, the coat she had once worn, and I looked at her. "The doctors say it's bad," she said, "but I know you'll take care of me. You know my body better than anyone. You know what I need." I felt the old pull. The familiar gravity of her need, her expectation, her unspoken demand that I become the nurse to her patient, the daughter to her mother, the extension of her will. I felt my hand reach for the chart at the foot of her bed, the reflex trained by 2 decades of performing her health for her. I stopped. I pulled my hand back. "I know your body, Mama," I said. "I know what you did to mine. I know about the talcum powder, the caffeine tablets, the falsified allergy tests, the letter from Dr. Hendricks when I was 12 suggesting Munchausen by proxy. I know you made me sick so I would never leave." She didn't flinch. She didn't deny it. She just looked at me with the patient expression of a woman who had prepared for this moment, who had rehearsed her defense in the quiet hours of the night. "I protected you," she said. "The world is dangerous, Vera. People are cruel. I kept you safe. I gave you a life." "You gave me a cage," I said. "You gave me 20 years of fear and isolation and dependence. You gave me a body that wasn't mine, a health that wasn't real, a childhood that didn't exist. And you called it love." "I did love you," she said. And I saw in the tears that formed in her eyes that she believed it. That her love was real to her, as real as the cancer eating her pancreas, as real as the talcum powder had been. She loved me the way a collector loves a rare specimen, the way a warden loves a prisoner, the way a god loves a creation that exists only to worship. "I know you think you did," I said, "but love doesn't poison. Love doesn't isolate. Love doesn't smile when the person you claim to care for can't breathe." I turned to leave. She called after me, her voice cracking, "Vera, don't leave me. I need you. I'm dying." I paused at the door. I looked back at her, at the woman who had been my world, my jailer, my only definition of self. "You were dying when I was 12, I said. "You were dying of emptiness, and you fed yourself my childhood to survive. I won't feed you my adulthood too." I walked out. I didn't go back, not while she lived. She died 4 months later. I got the call from the hospice nurse, a professional voice reading a script. "Your mother passed peacefully. She asked for you at the end." I hung up. I sat in my apartment, in the silence that had cost me 20 years to earn, and I waited to feel something. Grief, relief, anger, but there was nothing. Just the hollow space where a mother should have been, where a daughter had once existed, where now there was only me. The funeral was 3 days later. My mother had planned it herself, the church, the flowers, the music. She had left instructions with Mrs. Patterson, detailed and precise, the way she had planned everything in her life. She would be remembered as a saint, a devoted mother, a woman who had sacrificed everything for her sick daughter. The church was full. People I didn't know, people who had heard the stories, the nurses she had worked with, the neighbors she had charmed, the distant relatives who remembered her as the one who gave up her life for Vera. They wore black and they wept and they told me how sorry they were for my loss. "Your mother was an angel," they said. "She never left your side. She devoted her whole life to you." "She did," I said, and I smiled. It was the smile I had learned from her, warm, controlled, hiding the truth behind teeth. The pastor spoke. He talked about sacrifice. about maternal love, about the woman who had nursed her daughter through 20 years of illness, never wavering, never complaining. He invited me to speak as the bereaved daughter to share my memories. I walked to the podium. I was wearing my white coat underneath my black dress. I had brought a tablet. I had prepared a presentation. I want to share something with you, I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I used with patience, calm and authoritative, the voice of a doctor delivering a diagnosis. My mother was indeed devoted. She was devoted to keeping me sick, to keeping me dependent, to keeping me hers. I tapped the tablet. The screen behind me lit up with my first slide, the allergy test results, age 6, all negative. These are my medical records. Tests my mother told me were positive. Foods she told me would kill me. I ate them all when I was 22. I'm still here. Next slide, the letter from Dr. Hendricks. Munchausen syndrome by Proxy. Recommend immediate intervention. This doctor tried to save me when I was 12. My mother called him incompetent and changed physicians. No one followed up. Next, a photo of the industrial talcum powder. This is what she dusted my pillows with every night for 20 years. It's a respiratory irritant. It induced the asthma attacks that sent us to the emergency room where she was praised for her quick thinking. Next, the caffeine tablets, the falsified records, the nursing notes. Mother appears relieved when patient symptoms worsen. The church was silent, not the respectful silence of mourning. The silence of a room realizing it has been in the wrong play. My mother was not a saint, I said. She was a woman with a disorder that she chose not to treat. She sacrificed my childhood, my health, my autonomy to feed her own need to be needed. And you, I looked at the faces in the pews, at the people who had nodded along with the narrative of her sainthood. You were her audience. You watched me grow up sick and you never asked why I never got better. You never asked why I was never allowed to leave the house. You never asked why my mother smiled when I gasped for air. I closed the tablet. I looked at the casket, at the flowers, at the photograph of my mother that smiled from the altar. You can mourn the woman you thought she was, but I am here to mourn the child she stole. The child who never had a birthday party, never had a friend, never knew what it felt like to breathe without fear. That child is alive, she is standing in front of you, and she is done being silent. I walked down the aisle. No one stopped me. No one touched me. I walked out of the church and into the sunlight, and I breathed deeply, fully, without wheezing for the first time in a funeral. The fallout was predictable. Some family members called me a liar, a monster, a daughter who had desecrated her mother's memory. Others, an aunt who had always looked at me strangely, a cousin who had wondered why I was never at reunions, reached out. They believed me. They had suspected, they said. They had been afraid to ask. I didn't need them to believe me. I had spent 20 years needing my mother's validation. I was done needing anyone's. I opened La Clínica de las Curas Robadas 6 months later. It is a small practice, 3 exam rooms, a waiting area with chairs that don't smell like antiseptic. We serve adults who were victims of Munchausen by proxy as children. We help them obtain their real medical records, distinguish between induced and actual illness, rebuild their health and their trust in their own bodies. I have a therapist on staff, a nutritionist, a social worker, and me, Dr. Vera Castellano, the doctor who was never sick, who treats patients who were told they were dying and discovered they were only captive. Some of my patients become friends. Sarah from medical school works with me now. She specializes in pediatric ethics, in catching the signs I missed in myself. James, who taught me what parties were for, sends me postcards from his travels. And I have a partner, a woman named Dr. Liu, who is an immunologist and who laughs when I check the ingredients in my tea and who never, ever administers medication without explaining exactly what it is. I am healthy. I am 41. I eat what I want. I travel. I have a passport, a driver's license, a bank account, a life that belongs to me. I still check my pillow sometimes in new hotels for the smell of talcum powder. I still flinch when someone offers me food I didn't prepare, but I am learning to trust my body, to believe that it is mine, to breathe without waiting for permission. My mother is buried in the cemetery where she planned to be remembered. There is no headstone yet. The family is still arguing about what to engrave. I don't visit. I don't need to. She is not there. She is in the records I keep, the cases I present, the patients I save. She is the cautionary tale that makes me a better doctor. She is the ghost in the machine of my empathy. I am Vera. I am a doctor, a survivor, a woman who learned to breathe in a motel room with a hamburger in her hand. And if you are reading this and someone is telling you that your body is broken, that you need them to survive, that their love is the only medicine that works, question it. Get a second opinion. Check the ingredients. Open the windows. Your body is yours. Your health is yours. And the person who claims to love you by making you sick does not love you. They love the version of you that needs them. And you are so much more than need. See you in the next story.